There is something about a bedroom that holds memory the way old wood holds warmth. Long after the fire is gone, you can still press your palm to it and feel what used to be there. I've been standing in mine for a few minutes now, just looking at it. The curtains are new, white linen, the kind that breathes when the window is open. The paint on the walls is a color I chose on a Tuesday afternoon by myself, with no one's opinion but my own. A soft sage green, calming, honest, mine. But 6 months ago, this room was a different place entirely. 6 months ago, I stood in this same spot and felt the floor shift beneath me in a way I can only describe as the earth deciding to stop pretending. I want to tell you what happened. Not because I need you to feel sorry for me. I've come too far for that. But because I think some of you are living inside the version of this story that I used to live in. The version where you're still folding laundry and pretending the ground is solid. And I want you to know what comes after that. I want you to know there is something that comes after that. So let me take you back. His name was Daniel. And I want to be careful here because even now, even after everything, I don't want to turn him into a villain in a way that flattens what we actually were. We were real. What we had was real for a long time in the way that quiet and ordinary things are real. Not spectacular. Not the kind of love that shows up in movies with swelling music and rain-soaked kisses. Just steady, warm. The kind of love that meant there was always someone on the other side of the bed. Always a second cup of coffee made without being asked. Always someone who knew how I took my tea and remembered which side I liked to sleep on. We had been married for 7 years when everything changed. 7 years. Long enough that I had stopped seeing him clearly, the way you stop seeing the painting on your wall after a while, because it becomes part of the background of your life. I had stopped looking. I think, honestly, we had both stopped looking. The first sign was so small I'm almost embarrassed to say it out loud. His phone started sleeping face down on the nightstand. That was it. That was the very first tiny thread that, had I pulled it then, would have unraveled everything sooner. But I didn't pull it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was the kind of woman who trusted her husband and that trusting him was a virtue and that noticing small things and reading meaning into them was the habit of an anxious mind. So I kept not noticing. He started coming home a little later. Not dramatically later. Not hours that demanded explanation. Just enough that dinner would be slightly cold by the time he walked through the door. Just enough that the rhythm of our evening shifted in a way I kept telling myself was work, was stress, was the kind of natural ebb that happens in long marriages. I read 3 different articles about how marriages go through seasons. I highlighted the parts that made me feel better. I remember one specific night. It was a Thursday, I think, because we used to order Thai food on Thursdays, and I had the containers already open on the counter. And he came in, kissed me on top of my head the way he always did, and went straight to the shower. And I remember standing there thinking, he always showers when he gets home. That's not strange. That's just him. I stood there and I talked myself out of knowing. I think that's the part of this story that I sit with the most, even now. Not the betrayal itself, but the months I spent being a very gentle, very patient accomplice to my own blindness. The way I'd catch something, a glance at his phone that was a half second too quick, a name I didn't recognize mentioned once and never again, a perfume that wasn't mine and wasn't explained, and I would smooth it over in my own mind like pressing a wrinkle from a sheet, tuck it under, move on. One night, maybe 5 months before everything fell apart, I was already in bed when he came in. He set his phone down, face down, and I looked at him and I said, as softly as I could manage, "Is there something you want to tell me?" He looked at me, and he smiled, and he said, "No, babe." "Why?" And I said, "I don't know. You just seem far away lately." And he said he was tired. He said work was hard. He said he was sorry if he'd been distant. And he came to bed and he held me. And I lay there in the dark listening to him breathe and thinking, see? You were being dramatic. You were making something out of nothing. This is your husband. He is right here. I apologized to myself for doubting him. I look back at that woman, the one lying in the dark, talking herself into sleep, and I want to sit beside her. I want to take her hand and not say anything, because there's nothing to say. She already knew. She just wasn't ready yet. The morning I found out, nothing announced itself. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon, the kind where the light comes through the curtains at that soft angle that makes everything look a little golden, a little forgiving. Daniel was in the shower. I was folding laundry on the bed, his shirts, my cardigans, the mundane intimacy of a shared life all stacked in neat piles. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, and it was face up. I don't know why it was face up that day. I've thought about it many times since. Maybe he forgot. Maybe some part of him was tired of hiding. Maybe the universe, in its strange and particular way, decided it was time. I read the message. 8 words. I'm not going to repeat them here because they don't deserve space in this story anymore. But 8 words were enough. 8 words were the entire education. And here is what I remember most clearly. My hands kept folding the shirt. My brain was somewhere entirely else, somewhere white and loud and very far away. But my hands just kept moving, smoothing the fabric, matching the sleeves, folding the collar down neat, as if the body, in moments of real shock, simply refuses to make a scene. As if some very calm, very old part of me had been expecting this for so long that it wasn't even surprised, just tired. I set the shirt down on the pile. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I waited for him to come out of the shower. He came out, towel around his waist, running a hand through his wet hair, and he saw me. And he saw his phone. And every single thing I needed to know about the truth was written across his face in the 2 seconds before he composed himself. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I looked at him and I said, very quietly, "Tell me," and he did. He sat down on the edge of the bed, on his side, and he told me. Her name, how long, the beginning of it. He said it had started as nothing. He said he hadn't meant for it to go where it went. He said he was sorry, and he said it the way people say it when they know it isn't enough, but they don't have anything else to offer. I sat there and I listened to my husband explain how he had loved someone else while sleeping beside me, while kissing me on the top of my head, while holding me in the dark and letting me apologize to myself for doubting him. And something in me went very, very still. Not numb, not broken, just still. The way the air goes still right before a storm, when everything holds its breath. I thought, he picked the wrong woman. Not in anger, not in vengeance, just in this quiet, clear, absolute certainty. He picked the wrong woman to lie to. He picked the wrong woman to disappear on. Because I am not the kind of woman who crumbles into someone else's story. Even when I'm devastated, and I was devastated, I want to be honest about that, I remain my own. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. I want to tell you that I was strong every day and that I moved through the pain with grace. But that would be another kind of lie, and I'm done with those. The truth is that some nights I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. The truth is that I lay on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling and took inventory of every moment I'd been too trusting, too forgiving, too willing to smooth things over. The truth is that grief is ugly and relentless, and it does not keep reasonable hours. There is a specific loneliness that lives in the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, when the house is too quiet and your mind is too loud. I became well acquainted with those hours. I learned every creak this house makes, every sound the refrigerator makes when the ice shifts, every way the light from outside moves across the ceiling. I became an expert in the long night. I thought about everything. Our wedding, which had been small and simple and exactly what we'd wanted. The first apartment we shared, where the heating didn't work properly and we'd sleep in extra layers and think it was romantic. The trip to Vermont 3 years in, when we'd gotten snowed in at a little inn and ordered room service and stayed in bed for 2 days, and I had thought, this is the man. This is the one I chose, and he chose me, and we are enough for each other. Was any of it a lie? I still don't know how to answer that without it costing me something. I've decided that some questions are not meant to be resolved. Some questions you just learn to carry with less weight over time. I looked her up. Sarah. I'm not ashamed to say that either. I needed to put a shape to what had been taken from me. And she looked like a person. Just a regular person, which was somehow the most disorienting thing of all. I had imagined, in some irrational corner of myself, that she would look like an explanation. Like someone who made the equation make sense. She just looked like someone who had made a choice. And so had he. And so, eventually, would I. He came back once to collect his things. I stood in the doorway of this bedroom and I watched him move through the space that used to be ours, opening drawers, folding things carefully like he was trying to leave no trace, like he could reverse the mess by being tidy now. And somewhere in the middle of that, he stopped and he looked at me. And he said he was sorry. He said it like he meant it this time. Quieter, more broken. The kind of sorry that doesn't want anything back, that isn't trying to fix anything, that is just the last honest thing a person has to offer. I believe he was sorry. I also believe that sorry cannot rebuild what it took years to make. Sorry is the word that arrives after the house has already burned down. It names the fire. It doesn't raise the walls. I nodded. I told him I hoped he found what he was looking for. And I meant that too, in the complicated way you can mean something that also hurts you. Because I am not a woman made of bitterness. I never want to be. Bitterness is just grief that forgot to keep moving. He picked up his things and he walked out the front door, and I did not cry. That surprised me. After all those hours in the dark, after all that flooding grief, in the moment that should have been the hardest, I stood in the quiet of this room and I felt something I had no word for yet. Something that was not happiness and not relief, but was perhaps the very distant beginning of both. I want to tell you about the night I looked in the mirror. It was about 6 weeks after he left. I had been moving through the days in that careful, deliberate way you move when you're healing. Slowly, with attention, not trusting yourself to go too fast. I came into this room late at night and the lamp was on and I caught my own reflection in the mirror and I stopped. I really looked. Not performing, not checking if I looked okay or put together or like a woman who was handling things. Just looking at myself the way you look at something you haven't seen in a long time. And I thought, there you are. There was something in my face I had missed. Something that had maybe been buried under 7 years of compromise and accommodation and the quiet erosion that happens when you slowly, without noticing, begin to organize your life around someone else's comfort instead of your own truth. I was still there, through all of it, through the long nights and the folded laundry and the grief that didn't keep reasonable hours, through the apologies I'd made to myself for knowing what I knew. I was still there, intact, waiting. He picked the wrong woman to betray because I do not become less when I am broken. I become more honest. I become more clear. I become more completely, more unapologetically, more quietly and fiercely myself. I am repainting this bedroom. That sage green I mentioned. It goes up on Saturday, and I have been looking forward to it in the way I used to look forward to small luxuries I had to earn. A whole room in a color no one else chose. A space that breathes exactly the way I want it to breathe. I wrote him a letter months ago, long and soft and full of the kind of language that only pours out of a woman when her heart has been cracked all the way open and the light is getting in, whether she wants it to or not. I poured everything into it. The grief, the love that had been real, the anger I had kept so quiet it had become something else entirely. The things I wished I'd said in those months when I talked myself out of knowing, I never sent it. Because I realized, sometime between writing it and sealing it, that everything I had needed to say to him, I had actually been saying to myself. Every word was a word I needed. Every sentence was me, working out who I was on the other side of this. The letter wasn't for him. It had never been for him. It was the most honest conversation I had ever had, and it was with the woman in the mirror. I set it on the nightstand and I left it there, and eventually I let it go. If you are sitting where I once sat, on the edge of a bed that feels like it belongs to someone else's life, holding a truth you're not sure you're ready to carry, I want you to hear this. You already know what you know, and knowing it is not weakness. Knowing it is the first step back to yourself. Walking away from someone you loved is not giving up. It is not failure. It is not the end of your story. It is the bravest sentence a soft-hearted woman can speak. The sentence that begins with "I deserve" and ends with "more than this." I did not leave because I stopped loving him. I want to be clear about that. I left because I remembered, slowly, painfully in the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, that I had always deserved to be loved in return. Fully, faithfully, without having to talk myself out of what I knew. He picked the wrong woman to betray. Not because I am hard, not because I am cold, but because I am the kind of woman who survives her own grief and comes out the other side still soft, still open, still entirely herself. The kind of woman who repaints her bedroom in a color she chose alone and opens the window and lets the air move through. The kind of woman who sets down what no longer belongs to her and walks out the door and does not look back. The curtains move. The morning light falls clean and quiet across a bed that is made the way she likes it now. The room holds nothing it does not choose to hold. It is hers. She is already gone, not lost, not broken, not the woman she was 6 months ago on the edge of that bed. She is somewhere new, and she is whole.